Hey everyone, I'm Joe and today I'm going to be doing the answers part to my Milestone Q&A. I will link part 1 of this, which deals with the personal and professional stuff, in the description box below. This is the book related part, of which there are more questions than the personal part, which is not surprising as this is a booktube channel after all. And without further delay, I'll get straight into talking about the questions, because otherwise this video is going to be horribly long. So, question 1 is, how did you get into reading primarily SFF? And this is fairly simple because it is just what happened to be around when I was first learning to read at a young age. And my sisters read, so having science fiction and fantasy books around the place, in their bedrooms for instance, on shelves, and left around on tables and things, it was just the normal thing to be. So therefore when I started to read, I read those books, and indeed I read my sister's books in particular, because they read quite interesting fantasy books from my point of view. So it's just one of them things where, exposure leads to liking something, can occasionally lead to hating something, but not in my case. Question 2 is, who introduced you to SFF books and when did you start reading it? Now this question is linked to the other question, but it's slightly different because this is obviously about basically my reading origins, and there are two people that are responsible for my reading. I did not learn to read very early, actually. I was kind of late. I was 8.5 years old before I could learn to read, and it was in particular the deputy headmistress of my primary school who realised that my reading ability was really bad. I could read words, but I couldn't actually read sentences. When I tried to read more words in a row, it just didn't make sense to me for whatever reason. I can't really remember details now, but I know that was sort of the case. So she took it upon herself to teach me to read. So in the course of 3 months, she would come into the classroom and sit at the side of the classroom and focus entirely on getting me to read. And in 3 months, I went from virtually not being able to read to almost my current ability. My reading ability went through the roof in an extremely short time. And for the record, my teacher's name was Miss Thompson, so thank you to her for that, because that was responsible. The other person is my oldest sister, because she has always been a massive bookworm, just as much as I am. And when I was growing up, obviously her books lying all over the place was responsible for me getting interested in them, because, as I said, exposure makes you familiar with something, and if you're familiar with it, it's easier to get into, frankly. Question 3 is, what science fiction and fantasy book did you read that got you into reading other science fiction and fantasy? And this, I don't really have an answer because it was just too long ago. I started reading fantasy by reading Terry Pratchett and the Discord, as you may already know from previous videos. And then from there, after a few years, I started getting into other fantasy books. And then eventually I started reading science fiction. For the record, I read fantasy for almost exclusively for 10 years. I didn't actually read any science fiction at all until I was almost 20. So my love of science fiction, despite the fact that that's now the dominant genre, was actually remarkably late compared to when I started to read. Question 4 is, what was your journey into becoming a bookworm? And in particular, what book or series or person was responsible for making you that way? And as I said, it was just a combination really of both the fact that I had books around me when I was growing up, a teacher took an interest in me and made sure I could read extremely well, and obviously my sisters also knew that I liked to read after a time, and then she would take me to the library on a regular basis. For like 5 years I went to the library with my big sister, and indeed she would buy me books as well on a regular basis. So I do greatly appreciate my sister, despite the fact I never tell her that, of course, because obviously I will sarcastically insult my sister, because that's what you do. I do actually appreciate it as well, but she does know, despite the fact I never actually say it. Question 5 makes me smile because it is, how did you learn to read so fast, and how do you manage to find the time to read so much per month? And to be honest, I don't really know. It's just, when I was younger I would read at that speed, and to me that was not fast, that was just a normal reading speed. And then, to be honest, I only realised that by comparison to some people I am a fast reader as such when I joined Booktube. By my personal standards, I don't read exceptionally fast, and I don't really do anything to make myself faster. I just read a lot and read and concentrate on reading really heavily, so it's easy. As far as reading, finding the time to read so much a month, well, Steve didn't remember I do not have a TV, which I said about in the part 1 of this video. That eliminates any sort of distraction, so reading is my primary thing that I do on a day-to-day basis, frankly. It's very easy to read that much. Question 6 is, what are your favourite books and authors of all time? And this is really, frankly, impossible to answer because, as I've said about other questions in the past that involve favourites, I don't really have favourites because they evolve over time and it depends on the genre and the category you're talking about at that particular time. Because when I was younger, I would have different favourites. Then when I was in my teens, again, it probably would have been different, and now it's different again. Although one author that I've always loved, and to be honest, I've already said this author's name once already in this video, and to be honest, I've said it many times before, is Terry Pratchett and the Discord, because Terry Pratchett was the first author that I ever read as a child after I learnt to read, so Terry Pratchett is very important to me. Question 7 is, who are some of the booktubers that you like watching the most? Now, the easy answer to this, and it's a really obvious one as well, is Rachel, whose channel is Kalanadi. Rachel happens to be my favourite booktuber and my favourite person, so watching her videos is frankly obvious and I really look forward to her videos. Other people though would be, for instance, James, whose channel is James Chatham. He talks about an interesting range of books in a really interesting and slightly alternative way, because he will sometimes bring music into things as well, and I just really like that. And as far as a newer to me channel is concerned, that would have to be Kelsey's channel, who is the Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I've only been subscribed to her for about maybe 3 months at this point, but I have a feeling that she will be somebody that I will watch and look forward to her videos, because the way she talks about books and the humour she brings into it, I like. She does videos the way I like them, so I expect she will become a favourite of mine in time. Well, I mean, she already kind of is a favourite of mine already, even though I've only been subscribed for 3 months. Oh, and I will link all 3 of their channels in the description box below, of course. Question 8 is, what has been your booktube highlight? And this is actually very simple because it is quite simply meeting the other booktubers that I've done. Specifically, I've gone a few times to London now, and I met up with quite a few other booktubers, like for instance Caitlin, and I have actually met Katie from Katie Loves to Read, which I was quite pleased with because Katie's from Dublin, so meeting her is not something that I can easily do, although at the moment she's actually in England for university reasons, so hopefully I can meet her again in the near future. And yeah, just meeting people related to booktube, which I will be doing again this year, and indeed I will be going to America this year to meet some of them, is something that I really enjoy and it's just really great fun. Questions 9 and 10 I'm going to ask to get together because they are fairly heavily related, and that is, who inspired you to get into booktube and when did you find out about booktube? And this is actually quite simple. About 6 months before I created my channel, in the late summer of 2013, I was searching for information on a book, I believe, and I decided that out of curiosity I would type or copy and paste that particular book or author, I can't remember what it was, into YouTube as an experiment, because up until that point I'd always thought that YouTube was just for music people and gamers and like stupid sort of comedy stuff. So I typed it into YouTube and there's actually people talking about books on YouTube. And I was like, really? That's strange. So I looked for other things, and then people were talking about other books and other book related things, which amazed me even further. And then at Christmas that same year I was thinking that it might be interesting to explore booktube and indeed become part of it. And well, you know, it went from there basically until I am now, 4 years later. It does not feel like I've been on booktube 4 years, it really doesn't. It feels like maybe a year and a half, not 4 years. Question 11 is, what are your least favourite authors and what are some authors that you have completely given up on trying to read? And for this is quite difficult because least favourite authors would mean that all authors are somehow have a sort of like an internal rating system, that some authors are better than others. To me, as long as an author is good, then they're equal to everybody else. There are a few authors that I've tried and I thought were frankly useless, and I will list, like for instance, 2 of them, and that is Veronica Roth, specifically for the book Divergent, which was extremely popular because I thought that book was frankly laughable. It was so bad. As you may know, however, I got an issue with her, the writer. I just thought that book was particularly bad, and I thought the world building was frankly ridiculous. I really did. Young adult books don't generally work for me, as you may know. And the other author, and in particular book that I blame on that, is David Foster Wallace and Infinite Jest, because that book just did not go anywhere as far as I'm concerned. It just meandered on and on and on. I read half the book, so I gave it a big chance, you know. I mean, I read like 500 pages of the thing, and it was still not going anywhere, and it didn't really make any sense to me, so I was just like, well, you know, I'm not reading another 500 plus pages of meandering book, and there's tons and tons of footnotes. The footnotes and the little references where you have to go and look at the back of the book was driving me mad. Basically, I just thought that was stupid. You know, if you want to say something in the book, say it. Don't keep having footnotes everywhere and references to the back of the book. It's just unnecessary. Just say what you want to say. Question 13 is, are there books you reread? And for this, yeah, there definitely are. I will reread basically everything I own on these shelves eventually. Since I've started Booktube, I haven't reread books as often, I have to admit. But that's just because, well, at this point I've got so many books that I don't have time to reread them, because I'm constantly buying books nowadays and gaining books. So I'm reading sort of newer books all the time. So I don't reread them as often. I do like to reread, and indeed I do plan to reread certain books this year. And certain big series, which I'm greatly looking forward to. And indeed, there will be a very particular video coming up in the near future about a certain reread I'm planning. It should be interesting to say the least. Question 14 is, what are some of your most underrated books that you wished were talked about more? Now I assume this means talked about more on Booktube, and to be honest, there kind of really isn't any, because I don't really care if anybody is talking about the books that I like, because if I like it, that's all that really matters to me. And indeed, if I like a book, I will try and talk about it on my channel. So there is somebody talking about it, me. So if anybody else is talking about it, it's nice, but if not, I don't really care. I read books because I want to read them, not because they're popular and not because I think other people will approve. I read books purely because they look interesting to me. Question 15 is slightly longer than others, so I'm going to have to read it off. And that is, would you read books by authors such as Harry Turtledove and S.M. Sterling? I can really suggest How Few Remain and The Great War Trilogy by Turtledove. I'd love to hear your take on them. Now, I'm not sure if this was a question exactly for the Q&A, or was this just asked for me translating comments on that Q&A video. I don't know, but I'm answering it here. I have heard of both Turtledove and Sterling. I know that Sterling is responsible for the Emberverse series, and Turtledove, I believe, is an alternative history writer. So both of them I am aware of, and I have looked at their books, and they do have both books that look quite interesting, so I will probably get round to them eventually. But considering how many unread books I have on my shelf, yeah, it could be a while, it could be next month. I honestly don't know, because I don't really plan my reading too far ahead. I read what seems interesting at the time, and I am trying to reduce the amount of books I'm buying if possible at the moment, so we'll see when I get around to it. Eventually, yeah, it just could be a while. Question 16 is, have you ever read anything by Patrick Rothfuss? And the answer to that is simply no. And until I joined Booktube, I'd never heard of him as well. His name was totally unknown to me. Because, you know, I mean, the amount of authors that are out there is enormous. And while on Booktube he seems to be a big name, for me personally, he has no meaning to me. I mean, I only know him for that one incomplete series that people are still waiting for the third book by, I believe. So, you know, I'm not all that bothered by him, really. Question 17 is, what turns you off a book? Now, this took me a while to think about it, but there is one major thing that that really makes me not like a book, and that is any kind of harm or abuse to children. For instance, one book that I couldn't barely manage to finish because of the way it dealt with children was Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens, because the way, I mean, I know that is a period book, but the way they treated children in the book, and obviously the way Oliver was treated, was absolutely bloody awful, and it made me angry to read that book, and I could only barely manage to read it because the thought of doing anything to children makes me angry, and I generally want to kill somebody when that topic is brought up. Generally, the person doing the harm to children I would like to kill, so that's not a topic that I deal with easily, and I don't handle it well in books. Question 18 is related to this, and that is, what is the darkest book you have enjoyed, and what makes a book too dark? Now, this is kind of difficult because I don't really know what the most darkest book I've ever read is, and to be honest though, I'm not entirely sure which definition of dark you mean. Do you mean it in terms of brutal? Do you mean in terms of how just bloody and gory it is? I'm not really sure, but generally I don't read that many books that are that super dark. I read lots of science fiction and fantasy, and most obviously some science fiction can be quite dark in places. It's not normally that horrible in that sense. So I don't really have a proper answer for this, to be honest. It's one of these very difficult to answer questions, well, virtually impossible to answer for me. Question 19 is, what book would you like to edit to make better, and why? And this is one that I can't really answer yet again, because to me, why would I presume to edit a book that an author has written and presumably had edited themselves? Because that's really presumptuous of me. If they want to write a book, even if I might think it needs editing, that is their choice. They can write that book and publish it in that form, regardless of whether I think it's long and blathering on and it's just unnecessary. That's their choice. I'm not going to alter their choice, and I don't want to alter their choice. You know, it's free speech after all, which I'm a big believer of. I mean, yes, sometimes the authors, I wish they would get their books edited a bit more heavily and to be a bit more concise and a bit shorter, because some authors, I'm not going to say names, but do tend to go on a bit sometimes. But other than that, there isn't really any major thing I'd say about it. Question 20 is, what is the strangest place you have ever read in? And to be honest, I don't really have an answer for this, because I don't generally read in very many places, to be honest. I will read occasionally when I'm on a train. I will read when I'm at places occasionally, you know, whilst I'm waiting for things out and about sometimes. Mostly I read here, and quite literally right there, which is on my settee, and upstairs as well. Other than that, there's not very many other places that I read, so none of them are strange. They're just normal, everyday places. I've never read in any sort of weird, you know, any sort of unusual transport, or, you know, in giant crowds or anything. So, yeah, it's not a very interesting answer, to be honest. Question 21 is, what is the book world you would most like to live in? And for this, I'm going to have to choose the Discworld by Terry Pratchett, because I think the Discworld is such a fun and varied world, and obviously the characters are so fantastic that it'd just be great to live in and then get to meet some of the characters. You know, like, I mean, I'd love to meet Granny Weatherwax, for instance, because she is my absolute favourite Discworld character of all. But also it'd be great to meet Rhymes, Captain Rhymes, or Duke Rhymes, as he becomes, depending on which book you're on. And these other characters are just all brilliant, frankly, and I just like the world. Question 22 is, if you could spend a summer with any author, living or dead, who would it be? And I don't really have an answer for this, because why am I going to spend a summer with an author for? You know, just because they're an author doesn't mean that they're an extra interesting person or anything. I'd prefer to spend a summer with interesting people. Booktubers, yes. You know, spending a summer with some of the booktubers, like some of the booktubers that I mentioned earlier in the video, for instance, now that would be great. With an author, I'm not that bothered, frankly, you know. Yeah, they might be interesting, but I don't really know them. I do know booktubers, and I'll be quite happy to spend summer with them. Question 23 is, if you could live in any science fiction universe, which one would it be and why? And for this, there is actually only really one that comes to mind, and that is the Greater Commonwealth universe in Peter F. Hamilton's series. Now, he's wrote several series based in this world, which are just here above my head. The main one being the Void trilogy, which is one of my absolute favourite science fiction space opera trilogies ever. Actually, it is my absolute favourite, in fact. I would like to live in that universe after the events of the book have taken place, because the events of the book are quite dramatic and fairly violent in places. So I would like to be after the events of the book have calmed down and things. Then I can live in the universe, because it's a fantastic universe with really advanced technologies. You have all the worlds to explore, and it's just really detailed and massive, and it's just fun. It would be fantastic and interesting to live in, I think. The penultimate question, 24, is if you could give yourself a new name instead of Joe and use a science fiction inspired one, what would it be and why? And this is the most horrible question you could ever ask me, for the simple reason that I hate thinking up names for anything. For instance, when I play computer games, the worst part of playing a computer game is when you are asked in certain games to name your character. I hate naming characters in computer games. I can never think of good names, and to be honest, nowadays I use the same like 3 or 4 names that I've used for more than 10 years. Literally, I've got like 4 names that I keep rotating through. That's it. I cannot think of names. I just when you ask me like, name your character, that's the first name and the surname, my mind just goes blank, and I'm like, and I'll just do that for 5 minutes until I think, forget it. I'll just go with the familiar one that I've always used yet again, as I always do. And finally, the last question is, have you ever tried learning a fictional language? If so, which one and why did you learn it? And the very simple answer to this is no, I've never tried to learn a fictional language. When I was at school, we had to learn French for 5 years, and I still cannot speak literally one word of French at all. My French teacher was unpleasant, to say the least. I'm not going to get into details, but he was a very unpleasant guy, and frankly, as a result, I never learnt to speak French whatsoever. So, and to be honest, I never found languages to be very easy, despite the teacher. It just didn't work for me, frankly. Language didn't, learning language, or at least the school way. Maybe if I had a different way of learning languages, I may well pick it up. I would love to learn languages, actually. Knowing other languages, multiple other languages, is something I would love to do. Quite badly, in fact. I would love to be able to speak like Spanish and French and German and Italian, all these other languages, but I can't, sadly. Yeah, I'll see in the future though. Anyway, with that said, that is actually it for all of the questions for this part of the video, and indeed, that is it for all of the questions for the Q&A in total. If you have any questions about my answers, you'd like me to expand upon them, then please let me know, and I can do that in, obviously, the comments below. All my social media links can be found in the description box below as well. And with that said, that is it for this video. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you another day. Bye for now.